What's up, everyone? Tiger Stacker here. I have an awesome interview with none other than Jesse Day, who runs Commodity Culture. He is a Canadian who has relocated to Serbia. Certainly very interesting for me because me being of Serbian descent, and by the way, a lover of Nikola Tesla, I was tickled to death when I accidentally found him. And how did I find him? He interviewed my very first teacher, Lynette Zhang. And while I was watching to see what Lynette would say, she brought out what I sent her, a bag of hopium, at which time Jesse asked about it. Lynette dropped my name. All of a sudden, I started following Commodity Culture and loved it ever since. So I want to welcome my guest, Jesse Day from Commodity Culture. Welcome, Jesse.
I'm so happy to be here, Tiger. I really love what you're doing with your channel, and that was a really fun interview with Lynette. I got a chuckle out of the bag of hopium, and she brought up your name, and that led me to check out your channel. I think you dropped a comment as well, so I'm really happy to be here.
I did. I couldn't help it. So tell us about yourself. What got you into YouTube, and what started you in Commodity Culture?
Well, when it came to YouTube, my first YouTube channel, not many people know this, I launched it in South Korea. I lived in South Korea for 8 years. I speak Korean fluently, random fact. But I did a YouTube channel focused on eating spicy food. So I was the foreigner who challenged the spiciest Korean food. I did it in Korean, and I grew that channel to about 90,000 subscribers. It brought me a lot of success in the television industry in Korea as well. That was my main gig there. But that quick note aside, the journey that I'm on today with YouTube was really brought on by the beginning of my journey into sound money, where I discovered silver. That was my first passion. I'm pretty new to this game. It was 2020 when the pandemic hit. I got laid off my job at the time. I had returned from Korea to Canada at this point and was kind of trying to make a go of it back home. And my job laid me off, and somehow the government was sending me checks in the mail every month. And those checks were very close to the amount I was getting paid at my job. And then occasionally they'd send supplementary checks, some extra money. And I started to think, like, how does this make sense that the government's just sending me all this money? Where's this money coming from? And that really led me down a rabbit hole to trying to understand what is money and the difference between the fiat currency system we live under today and gold standards of the past, of which there have been various, as well as silver standards. Copper's been used as money before. So I kind of went down that rabbit hole, and that kind of woke me up in a big way, not only to understanding money, but to looking into governments in general and realizing that they generally don't have the people's best interests at heart. In Canada, there was so many restrictions during the pandemic. That's one of the main reasons I moved to former Yugoslavia, that lovely silver maple there. Yeah, one of the first coins I started stacking, actually. And it led me to Croatia originally, and then I moved to Serbia after that, where I remain today. But it was an interest in sound money to start the YouTube channel. I also became very interested in energy and how it was created. I read a book called Energy, A Human History. That really opened my eyes to all the different forms of energy that humanity uses to support our civilization and our way of life. And I also became particularly interested in uranium. And my YouTube journey started with documentaries. I did documentaries on various commodities. I started off with coal. I did oil, then I did uranium. I eventually went on to do gold, silver, platinum, palladium as well. And the uranium documentary, which was my third or fourth video that I posted, did very well. It got a very strong response. And it also brought asset management, one of the biggest commodities companies in the world. They issue ETFs linked to physical commodities. They have a uranium ETF. They have a platinum, gold, and silver backed by physical ETFs. So they licensed that documentary. And from then on, they started to license all my work, all the documentaries I was doing. So on this journey, that was kind of a really lucky early start. And I was able to realize, okay, I think I can do the YouTube thing and keep moving forward with it. However, these documentaries were taking anywhere from 3 to 4, sometimes more months to put together one documentary. And so I didn't have any regular content. So it was tough to build a subscriber base. And I have a broadcasting background from my time in Korea. I did a lot of morning TV shows, radio, all this stuff. And I also lived in China for a short time where I also did broadcasting work. So I had kind of that background already, and it just seemed a natural fit to start doing interviews. At that time, I was watching Kitco News, Stansberry, a lot of these different shows. And that kind of led me to taking it to an interview route where I interview, people like Lynette Zhang, people like Andy Scheckman, people like Martin Armstrong, to discuss, the channel's a bit of a mixed bag in terms of content. It's pretty focused on gold and silver, but it's also focused on personal sovereignty and individual freedom, as well as geopolitics. And we talk about other commodities as well, uranium, copper, etc. And it's been an amazing journey so far.
This channel is affiliated with ARC Silver Gold Osmium. The owner, Ian Everard, is one of the most honest bullion dealers in the United States. ARC Silver Gold Osmium's owner, Ian, advertises new stackers to start their portfolio in the exact order he named his company. First, starting with a base of silver, then based upon the individual's plans and abilities, progressing to gold. Although he is the first dealer of osmium in the United States, he recognizes that osmium is not for every stacker or collector, and he does not advise this for everyone, but it is there for the stacker or collector who is interested in additional metals, including osmium, platinum, palladium, and others. ARC Silver Gold Osmium has some of the best prices that you can see here and on his website, noted in the QR code and in the description below. You can also call for pricing and purchasing and take advantage of his specials today by reaching out to Ian at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com. And make sure to tell him, of course, that Tiger Stacker sent you. That's wonderful. In fact, I have invested in uranium royalty and a uranium mine. They've actually been my best royalty and mine that I've invested in.
Yeah, uranium's done very well. I think there's a lot of upside to come for the uranium sector. The setup for it is absolutely insane. And I think there's plenty more upside there, personally.
Well, that sounds great. And I certainly would love to explore that avenue with you. If it's something you want to go on, because I have my next question, but if it's something you want to expand upon, I'm certainly willing to listen.
I would love to. Uranium's my favorite topic. So at the moment, the main thesis and the reason to invest in uranium is simply the supply deficit. It's a very large supply deficit. It has been going on for several years now. Mined supply has actually been in a deficit for longer than several years. So we have to go back to post-Fukushima, the Fukushima disaster, when that nuclear reactor melted down. In the aftermath of that, not only did Japan shut down all its nuclear reactors, but the world kind of reviled nuclear energy, and it was dangerous and it was evil. And so a lot of countries followed suit and started shutting down their nuclear reactors as well. Now, nuclear power is the cleanest, safest, and most reliable form of energy that exists on this planet. If we look at deaths caused by nuclear energy, I believe there's a statistic out there somewhere. There's a few different sources that give this statistic. It's like deaths per kilowatt hour or something like that. And nuclear is either the lowest, lower than even wind energy and solar. I think more people die falling off of wind turbines when they're putting them together. Still a very, very small number of people, but that's how safe nuclear energy is. And I believe there's another version of that study that shows wind and solar is like slightly less dangerous than nuclear, but it's extraordinarily safe. And all of these nuclear so-called catastrophes that have happened in the past, out of all of them, the only notable one is Chernobyl. And that was due to extraordinarily misguided leadership, in Soviet leadership at that time. It was also due to the fact that this was a joint nuclear reactor and a nuclear weapons manufacturing plant. So they combined the two into one, which is not what you want to do. There was major flaws in the reactor design. So Chernobyl was a very rare event that nonetheless, it's the boogeyman still to this day that people bring up. 3 Mile Island, nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. No deaths. The reactor started. I don't know the exact specifics of it, but I do know that in terms of safety, absolutely nothing happened. Now, people did need to be evacuated. There was a big panic. the reactor threatened to melt down, but it was contained and there was no damage done. And then when it comes to Fukushima, actually, there was no recorded deaths or injuries related to Fukushima as well. Now, one could argue there were some elderly, a handful, and this is, any deaths are bad, but there were some elderly hospital patients who actually died from being suddenly transported outside of the area that the radiation was in after the meltdown happened. But other than that, there was no deaths, no injuries. Of course, there was long-term damage done. That was another heavily flawed design. Now, since Fukushima, the safety standards of the nuclear industry have gotten insane to the point where it's too overregulated now. They actually need to cut the red tape and reduce regulation, particularly in places like the United States, because right now they're very interested in energy security. We've got President Trump, as well as the Department of Energy, really trying to push this narrative that we're going to build out our nuclear capacity. And yet the regulation is so stringent, you can look at China, and China's going, guys, we're building 150 nukes here. They've got plans to build 150, I think by 2035 or something ridiculous like that. And they're actually putting shovels in the ground and building these things at a rapid pace because they're not, they don't have such a suffocating regulatory environment. Still super safe, still everything up to board. But my point with that long rant is post Fukushima, there was a big overhang of uranium inventories because there was now all of this mined uranium that was not being used for nuclear reactors. So that took a while to eat through. And then in the 1990s, there was something called the megatons to megawatts program, where Russia decommissioned a bunch of their nuclear warheads and used that material for nuclear fuel to fuel reactors. So that also created another huge dump of inventory onto the market, once again bringing down prices. So it was a very prolonged bear market for uranium post Fukushima. But as slowly but surely those above ground inventories got eaten through, we are where we are today, which is there's just not enough uranium to power the reactors that currently exist, let alone the ones planned under construction and that have been extended. So it's simply a supply-demand story at the end of the day. And I find when it comes to uranium, it's a little, I like to compare uranium to other commodities, energy commodities like copper, silver, oil. These are all, copper's involved in electricity generation. So is silver, used in all electronics. Oil, obviously, natural gas. All of those commodities, they have so many different uses within the world of energy that it's hard to track supply and demand accurately because there's so many applications for copper, for example, for silver on the industrial side. Same with oil. It gets separated into so many different kinds of products for different purposes that it's very difficult to get a spreadsheet out and track, how much supply versus demand there is. But with uranium, it has one purpose and one purpose only, which is fueling nuclear reactors in our modern world. And so it's very stark and it's very obvious that the supply deficit is here. And that's why I believe the uranium price has to go a lot higher. Now, before we move on, and I know I'm taking up a lot of time, I could go on forever. The pricing mechanism for uranium is very fascinating as well and hard to wrap your head around. So there's a spot price, which most investors look at because it's the most frequently updated. There's no futures market for uranium. There is a spot price, there is a futures market for uranium, but it's basically broken and doesn't work. There's a spot price, which is the most most frequently updated price. The issue there is it's extraordinarily thinly traded. And on a good year, it only accounts for 25% of transacted volumes of uranium in a year. That's on a really good year. Now, the long-term market is where most transactions are done. These are long-term contracts signed between utilities and producers. The issue with these long-term contracts, so we have a spot price and we have a long-term price, referred to as the term price. The term price is a more accurate barometer of where the true value of uranium is. However, it is also opaque because many, if not the majority of long-term contracts for uranium are signed with non-disclosure agreements attached to them where the price is not discussed. We don't know the floors and ceilings. So even the term price is a best guess at the true value of uranium. So this makes it very difficult because when you're looking at other commodities, most of them have a futures market. and a spot market that's like updated second by second. You can go to TradingView and open your chart and you'll see the price of silver moving in real time. There's no such pricing mechanism for uranium. So that throws a lot of people off. It causes people to pay attention to the spot price, which is not the true value. However, it does drive investor sentiment in the short term. So even when understanding that it doesn't represent the true value of uranium, you still need to be watching it because it can move markets up or down in the short term, but knowing that in the long term, the term price and then also just the supply deficit, pay attention to that. Pay attention to all of the problems that uranium mines are running into. We've got Cameco and Kazatomprom. Kazatomprom produces like a third of the world's uranium. They're running into massive problems. They're cutting production guidance. They've got a sulfuric acid shortage, which is interrupting their in situ mining operations. Aside from a host of potential other problems nobody knows about because they're a state-owned enterprise and we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but it's not great. Cameco having issues. This is the other big giant in the Athabasca Basin. Kazatomprom is in Kazakhstan. Cameco's in the Athabasca Basin, Saskatchewan, Canada, and they're the other giant in the industry. They're cutting production guidance. They're indicating that they now have to go to the spot market potentially to procure pounds to fulfill their own long-term contracts. This is huge. In addition to a lot of developers who are trying to ramp up into production are facing issues. So there's problems throughout the industry. Also a massive shortage of qualified personnel in the nuclear industry and the uranium mining industry right now. So all of this is coalescing into a perfect storm, which already has played out since 2020. If we go back to the beginning of 2020 and we look at, say, something like the URNM ETF, which is a basket of uranium miners, I think it's the best proxy for the sector. It's risen tremendously over that time, and some of the individual miners have done between 500 and 1,000% over those 5 years. So we're kind of already in the bull market. It began around 2020, or what some could argue 2018, 2019 it started. But I think we still have a long ways to go from here because I believe the incentive price required to bring new production online is much higher than where the price of uranium is today. And so I rest my case.
That is way more than I knew. But that explains why, in my mind, why my uranium mines and royalties has substantially done better than what else I've gotten involved with, which is junior miners for gold, silver, copper, gold
Right.
royalties. And I don't think silver's done well simply because the LBMA, it doesn't have enough. COMEX now doesn't have enough. The refiners are trying to catch up. They don't want alloyed silver. And what's more unpure than alloyed silver? Silver ore. So if they don't want to get the copper out of the silver, then they definitely don't want to deal with galena. So I think that will change in the future. And I did want to go down a couple of your personal things here. As you have known, and a lot of my viewers know, I'm fourth generation Serbian descent, and you're a Canadian who chose to relocate to Serbia. What led you to that decision, and do you like it?
So ultimately, what first led me to Croatia was the pandemic. After Croatia, I moved to Serbia. I'll kind of bridge that gap in a second. But basically, former Yugoslavia, to me, the whole area is fairly similar. Same language: Croatia, Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia. Slovenia has a bit of a different language, but kind of similar as well. So very similar customs and cultures, and the people are amazing. But essentially what led me to Croatia was the pandemic, because in Canada, the rules and regulations were extraordinarily severe, and I just wasn't up for them. And I'm not making a point of what's right or wrong or whether this or that should happen. Just for me personally, I was just in a situation where I was like, I cannot live in this society. That this just doesn't work for me. And actually at that point in my life, that's when I realized, wow, personal freedom and individual, like my own sovereignty, is more important to me than anything else in this world. Because when I left Canada, I didn't have some massive amount of money. I'd saved up about 6 months of living expenses in Croatia at that time. Croatia was way cheaper in 2021, by the way, which is when I left, than it is today. Prices have like doubled, tripled since then. But at that time, it was very affordable. And so I saved 6 months living expenses. I basically told my boss, I was working for an investor relations firm, and I told my boss, I'm out. I gotta leave this country. If you want to keep me on as a remote employee, great. If not, I understand. but I was ready to just kind of go out there and figure it out. And my YouTube channel had just started to pick up steam. I just had that incident happen where Sprott Asset Management contacted me and said, hey, we want to license your uranium documentary. And so I thought, okay, maybe I can turn that into something, but I wasn't sure. I just knew I needed to get out of the country. And so I did a ton of research. I put spreadsheets together. I had all these different categories. I was looking at what the rules in society were surrounding the pandemic. I was looking for the cost of living, taxes, what sort of residence programs do these countries have? What's the culture? So I went through, probably 60 or so countries. And a lot of the countries I ended up shortlisting were in the Balkans region. Albania was the first one that was on my radar. And then I discovered Croatia, Serbia. I was looking at Bulgaria and some other areas, potentially Albania, as I mentioned, and potentially Bosnia, Romania. So it was kind of all the countries in that area that had the loosest restrictions, shall we say, when it came to pandemic rules and regulations. And so that largely drove my decision. Croatia ended up being an excellent choice. It was everything I hoped it would be. It was like stepping out of a prison cell of Canada into like fresh air. It was amazing. Like I can say that country gave me my freedom back. And so I spent a year and a half there. They have a digital nomad residence program, of which they charge you 0% tax, but you can only do it for 1 year. So I was fortunate that my employer decided to keep me on as a remote worker. So I was able to continue making an income and support myself. And after a year and a half went by, my digital nomad visa expired. And unfortunately, in Croatia, there's no way to renew that. You have to leave the country for 6 months, then come back, reapply, do it for another year. So there wasn't a lot of options for long-term residency in Croatia, unfortunately. And so I thought, okay, maybe I'll come back, but let me, I've got to be out of the country for 6 months anyway. So I spent 3 months in Montenegro. I decided, well, I'll go to Montenegro for 3 months, Serbia for 3 months, and then decide what I want to do. So I went to Montenegro, didn't really like it. It was a little bit like, basically Croatia, Serbia, the infrastructure in both is very far below the standard that we experience in a place like America or Canada. But Montenegro is even a step below that. So it was a bit of a bridge too far for me. But then I got to Serbia and started spending time here and realized like, wow, this is really similar to Croatia in terms of the people are really cool, super nice. The cost of living is much lower here than in Croatia. And they have excellent long-term residence programs, absolutely excellent, super flexible and super they just give you a 3-year residence permit. And then after 3 years, you get permanent residence. It's like they're going the opposite direction of the EU, which is clamping down more and more on residences and citizenship by investment and these types of things. Serbia is like opening up in the opposite way. And they actually changed some legislation to make it even easier and more long-term after I arrived here. So it just felt like, hey, this country is opening its door to you. There's a program I watch called Nomad Capitalist with this guy, Andrew Henderson. He always talks about living in different jurisdictions. And his saying is, go where you're treated best. And here was Serbia saying, hey, stay here as long as you want. Super low tax rate, low cost of living. We'll process your residence. I mean, the bureaucracy is absolutely a nightmare to deal with here and all over former Yugoslavia. But as long as eventually you have the papers, which you'll be able to get, you'll get stamped through. It's just very frustrating experience, obviously. But that's kind of what led me to decide to stay here. I've been here. It'll be 3 years in August of this year. And I'm absolutely really happy with it. Like I said, you give up some conveniences of back home. The infrastructure is a little shoddy compared to what we're used to in so-called legacy brand Western countries. But the people are incredible. Like I said, cost of living and taxes are low and extraordinarily safe. The level of safety in Serbia is actually absurd. And most people don't know or understand this. They can't wrap their head around it. They think Serbia and they think about like the Yugoslavian wars in the 90s and they think somehow there's like still danger here. There's no violent crime. The only violent crime that exists is gangsters attacking each other. And that's not that common, but it happens. Assassinations happen when one gang member kills another because they owe him money. That actually happened recently. But these are like very remote and not normal occurrences. You can walk in any area of Serbia, male or female, at any time of the night. You could be blind drunk and waving money in the air. And the chances that anything is going to happen to you is so unbelievably low. You're actually more likely to have a Serb try to help you find your way home than you are somebody try to pick your pocket or take your money or anything like that. So that's a major factor for me as well. And when I weigh kind of the pluses and minuses. So overall, love it.
That sounds wonderful. In fact, it fits some of the personality of my ancestry. I was raised as a fourth generation, typically monolingual English only, but the culture was still here within the family. And also the history I found out about when after the Soviet system started and the Russian Orthodox people got out, and their first stop to stay for an extended period of time was Serbia, and they treated them like family then they moved to New York and then later to other areas of America. But that fits in with everything I've ever been taught, and it's always been on my bucket list to go to my ethnic homeland. So if you're still there,
you should. Oh, I'll be here. And one other point I want to quickly make is the Orthodox Christian faith, which is imbued within society here. I'm personally not religious. I believe there's a higher power. I believe that there's a God, and I believe that the reason humans are here is to do good and to help each other. I think that's the main thing. But I don't belong to any particular religious denomination. But the way that Serbs practice Orthodox Christianity here is it kind of imbues society. And in my mind and the way I see it, it kind of motivates a lot of people's behavior. So what I see is a much more solid moral compass from your average person on the street, for example, than in a place like Canada, where the actually religion is mocked in Canada. Most of Canada, you're seen as stupid if you go to church or believe in Jesus or any of these things. Here, it's kind of the opposite, and people really take their religion to heart. And it really does create more of an environment where you just feel like everybody's got their morals correct. They understand what's good and evil, which is not the case in my former home country, unfortunately.
I fully understand that. Similar to what I've experienced. If it's okay with you, I might not see you for a little while. So if I don't, I'd like to wish you a holiday season. Christos Rodi, Christ is born. And the correct response, and if in case you don't know it, is Voistinos Rodi, indeed he is born. Which I've heard that you're learning Serbian.
Yes, I'm slowly but surely learning. I'm actually dealing with this nightmare of getting my driver's license in Serbia. Long story short, my old driver's license expired in like 2005 in Canada. I took off to Korea, or to China at that time before Korea. I just said, well, whatever, I left it. And by the time I came back, it was too late to renew. I had to start again. And then the pandemic hit, so I couldn't take my driving test to get my license again, and I left the country. So now I'm in a position where I got to take the whole test in Serbian, which is a challenge to be sure. But yeah, my Serbian's basic Serbian, buy a coffee, go to the grocery store, go to a restaurant. I can do all that. Should be better. The problem is Serbs all speak English, and they're all so damn nice that when you try to speak Serbian to them and they realize you're a foreigner, they just start talking English to you. So it's a little tough in that sense.
Yeah, my dad, he understood it when it was spoken to him, but he always answered in English. It was a wonderful dad. Not really great as a teacher, but he did teach me pronunciation, so that when I started learning Russian, because my wife is Ukrainian, my accent's pretty good. But
nice.
But I speak better than I hear, so it's kind of fun.
Right.
Anyway, so when you decided to move to Serbia, how do I say this? Has the decision to live in Serbia helped you with teaching people about the stacking community?
Well, I've encountered, the thing is, in Serbia, when it comes to the Serbs and what they invest in, it's usually real estate. That's the thing in this country. People don't really trust the stock market. Not a lot of people are aware of gold and silver in the way that, obviously, we live in an echo chamber, right, Tiger, where everybody, we do interviews like this where we love to talk about gold and silver, and, on my show and on social media, we're kind of in those communities. But when it comes to your average person in Serbia, the people that I do come across and make friends with, I absolutely do talk about gold and silver and why they're so important. A lot of people in this country, because they don't have a lot of capital to invest, a lot of them tend to speculate. because their thinking is, well, I only have such a small amount of capital. I need to 10x it to even make a difference in my life. So they kind of gamble on cryptos or, penny stocks without really doing a ton of research. So I am trying to do my part to steer people towards sound money. The other issue is, as you may know, in Europe, there's an outrageous tax on silver. It's like something like 20 plus percent. I think it might be more than 20%. So it's not even worth buying because you're down 20% right away. So that's an issue here that needs to be fixed because, again, for your average Serb to buy an ounce of gold is completely out of reach. And so you have to go into these smaller denominations. Even that's very, very expensive now. And obviously you're paying a higher premium the smaller size coin you buy. And so this is an issue because my normal go-to when I'm speaking to somebody who maybe doesn't want to spend, 4,400, whatever gold is right now for an ounce, plus the premium, is to say you should start stacking silver because you can start with a single silver coin. And once you feel the weight of that coin in your hand, there's almost like a evolutionary psychological perspective that it's always been money for so long, for thousands of years. So as a human, when you hold silver or gold in your hand, it's like, for me anyways, and I'm sure you feel the same way, there's almost like this instinctive connection to it to understand this is actually what money is, right? But unfortunately, because the premiums or because of the tax, that's a lovely coin. That's really nice.
I poured that. That's one of my channel rounds.
That's so awesome. I need to get a commodity culture channel round. That's great.
I might be able to do that for you. You'll have to tell me what the rules are because I sent some silver to England and I had to go through some customs issues.
Oh my God, Serbian customs is the worst in the world. Well, speaking of the negatives of Serbia for a brief moment, customs are really, really bad. So probably wouldn't work. But perhaps we could figure something out. You could send it to Canada, and I could pick it up from my parents' place because I do go there every year. But getting back to the whole stacking, being able to spread the message, I definitely put in an effort. I let people know that gold and silver, you need to have a base before you start speculating on. Go ahead if you want to for fun, gamble, because that's what it is. Gamble on little crypto coins and some sort of penny stock, but you need to have the foundation. Oh, you've got a Bitcoin that's a silver coin. I like that.
Yep, I poured that one too.
That's nice. That's awesome. So I'm hoping that more people will catch on. But it's a long journey ahead, and I feel like it might take, like with most people, right? Serbia is not alone in the fact that most people don't understand that gold and silver is money. But I've got hope for the future for sure.
That's wonderful. Even though you do talk about precious metals, like you said, you didn't limit your topic only to those, and you did elaborate on a lot of the items, such as especially uranium, but also coal and oil. I think we've covered that a good bit, unless there's something I haven't covered with you. Otherwise, I'll move on to the next question. But did we cover everything on that?
Yeah, I'll say real quick that I think oil is right now one of the greatest investment opportunities. It's completely hated. Most people believe it's just going to keep going down. The fact is, it's the lifeblood of our civilization. We need more of it moving forward, not less. I could go into another big rant. I'm not going to, because I don't have near the knowledge in the oil and gas sector that I do in uranium, but I think it should be on investors and speculators' radars to take a deep dive and see if there's value there.
I think you're probably right, especially in the United States with Trump wanting to drill, baby, drill, frack, baby, frack. So,
yes.
I personally think that it needs to be, and that's why I got into the mining stocks, because I believed that Trump was going to try to bring everything back home in-house. With your stacking, do you leave that back home? Or probably shouldn't ask you that. You probably shouldn't let people know where you keep your stuff.
I vault all my metals because, it is easy, for example, to bring gold or silver into Serbia. But I prefer to keep it vaulted because I just rather have that peace of mind. Obviously, you want to have a few coins around, but I vault most of my actual physical coins and bars.
Yeah, I split mine a little bit at home and a good bit somewhere else because I
Yeah.
don't want someone coming to the house.
Yeah, exactly.
With the rising prices of precious metals, what is your approach to precious metals, and how does your approach to other commodities, like we said about oil and real estate, fit in with your overall plan?
Well, when it comes to precious metals, the physical metal is the foundation for me. I believe that even for anybody, physical metal should be the foundation before you start investing in anything. You don't need to have some huge stack or something, but at least get some silver. If you can afford gold, get an ounce of gold in your hand. And then, because that's your insurance policy, that's your removing wealth from counterparty risk. That's actually the most useful aspect of precious metals to me, is that you get to remove your wealth from the counterparty risk of a bank. You get to convert your fiat currency, which has counterparty risk, with your government, and then you can convert it into a physical metal that belongs to you and without counterparty risk. Now, with vaulting metals, it can be argued. Some people are pretty hardcore about that. They say, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. I understand that concept. I think when you get to a certain amount of metal, though, you need to be concerned to some extent, like you said, about just the possibility of theft. So in that sense, it's the foundation. And then from there, I move into equities. And when I invest in precious metals mining stocks, I'm pretty focused on ETFs and royalty streaming. So GDXJ and Wheaton Precious Metals, which is a streaming company, are my two largest holdings on the stock side. And I just love the royalty streaming model because you cut out so much of the risk. With a large royalty streamer like Wheaton Precious or Franco-Nevada, they own literally 100 streams or royalties around the world in different jurisdictions. And so you're diversifying your risk so much that if one mine has an issue in one part of the world, well, they've got all these other streams already online that they're making profits from. They don't have to worry about the price of the input cost going up. If oil skyrockets and the cost to mine gold goes way up, they don't bear any of the brunt of that. So there's a lot of reasons to love the royalty streaming model in my view. And then I like the ETF approach as well, to be able to invest in that basket of miners and diversify your risk in that sense. And then when it comes to my overall portfolio, I'm pretty commodities focused. My biggest position is uranium. My second biggest is the oil and gas sector. And then third would be precious metals and precious metals miners. I also think that agriculture is very interesting, particularly fertilizer stocks. Stocks are involved, companies are involved in the production of phosphate and potash, I think are going to do very well, and they've all been completely beaten down. And unlike oil, which is hated, fertilizer is just forgotten. Nobody even talks about it. There's no fertilizer community on X. There's no message boards talking about fertilizer stocks. It is literally shoved in the corner and forgotten about by market participants at large. So I think that presents a very interesting opportunity for investors as well. So basically that kind of approach is my overall portfolio. I like to, fixed income. If I'm saving, I'm about to buy a house. So I was saving for that instead of, I don't like to speculate with money that I need. Instead, I put that into US Treasury bills, diversify a little bit of that into emerging market debt to get a higher yield for a little bit more risk. And that's kind of my overall approach.
Wow, that's impressive. A lot of the people I have on my channel don't have that much of a diversification. They're more straight stackers, some numismatists, but most of them are of the mindset if you don't hold it, you don't own it. And watching you, and it sounds like you've been pretty successful with ETFs and stocks and all the other varieties of investing that you mentioned. Me personally, I was horrible at stocks. That's how I got into precious metals. I found some of my retirement funds that I'd forgotten that I'd had, and they had basically had the same dollar value over the years just because of the fluctuation over the years.
Right.
And I did horrible, not as bad, but horrible with crypto. So I then got into precious metals, remembering my grandfather and what he'd taught me, because he would teach me about, the old silver dollars and the constitutional silver as we know it now, but it was still there when I was born. I was born in 62, so it had 2 more years before they converted it over. So
Yeah.
So I got into this, and I woke up in 2021 and started stacking heavy from that point on. I played a little bit with the mines, like I told you, simply because I put a little faith in what Trump had said about drill baby drill and mine baby mine. But to hear someone who is actually succeeding financially in the stock market, in the ETF market, I gotta take my hat off to you. I don't hear that story very often. So congratulations.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I mean, I don't know what I've been investing in equities for around 5 years. I don't know what my actual returns are. They are fairly good. They have beaten the benchmark if we're looking at the S&P and the broad market, for example. So I would have to get back to you with an actual calculation over the course of 5 years, but it's been especially good this year because of the rise in metals and the commodities sector in general.
Wow. So are there any other topics that you would like to cover? Because I've run out of my questions.
Well, I'll just leave people with kind of in terms of an approach to investing in equities. I highly, believe that building a foundation, just like with precious metals, you build a foundation of physical metals before you start speculating on mining stocks. Before you speculate on mining stocks, I would build a foundation of royalty streaming and ETFs first and make that your largest position. That's always my approach in any sector. In the oil and gas space, the XLE ETF is my largest position. That's heavily weighted to ExxonMobil and Chevron and a lot of the biggest producers in the United States. When it comes to uranium, URNM is my largest position, the ETF that's heavily weighted to Cameco and Kazatomprom, the 2 biggest producers, and that contains a basket of developers and a few explorers as well. When it comes to the agriculture space, I've got an ETF for that as the largest position. So I just think that that's, you diversify yourself within, if you're bullish on a particular commodity and you want to speculate or invest in the companies that produce that commodity, then having a big amount of diversification through an ETF as your foundation to the house you're building is the best way to go, in my opinion. And then you can feel much more comfortable speculating on maybe some smaller cap stocks that might have the potential to 10x, but that are higher on the risk curve. And then you can allocate smaller amount of capital to those, because if you're trying to get outsized returns, you can lower your risk by, let's say you're hoping something will 10x. I'm just using random figures here. You can put $1,000 into that and then put $10,000 into the ETF, because if the sector as a whole is moving forward in a positive manner and the fundamentals all play out over the years, then the ETF might double or triple, and the stock you speculated on might go to zero because you're taking on individual company risk, and mining is an extraordinarily hard business, but you have that foundation that will carry you. Sorry, I'm knocking my mic here. That will carry you through. So I would leave people with that.
That sounds like good advice, and certainly something I'm going to have to educate myself over. So I know you have an appointment coming up real soon, so we can bring this to an interview, although I would really love to have you back again, if that's okay with you.
Oh, yeah, anytime. I'm happy to come back.
That sounds fantastic. So everyone, I got to tell you, Jesse, I've watched him ever since I saw him interview Lynette Zhang and show her my bag of hopium that I sent to her. So after that, he's carried the football the whole way himself. I've watched him interview a whole lot of different people. Lynette Zhang, Gerald Celente, of course, your sponsor, Ian Everard, who also is affiliated with my channel, and so many others. So basically, go see this guy. If you haven't gone to watch, you're going to learn a lot. I have, and certainly more than just the precious metals. Jesse, if you'd be so kind as to let me know whatever links you want me to put in the description below so people can find you easier. And I'll certainly do the @ for YouTube if there's anything else you want them to go to, like maybe your store where you're selling your t-shirts or something else, then, please feel free. I'll put that all in the description below. And everyone out there, please leave a comment. When you go to either this channel or to Jesse's, please make sure that you hit the subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything, but it does help the YouTube algorithm promote the channels. And if you will, once you hit the subscribe button, do something else, because YouTube will take you out as a subscriber thinking you're a bot. So hit the like button, hit the bell notification, leave a comment. That will tell YouTube algorithm you're a real person and not a bot. Do it for Jesse's channel, and if you will, for this channel too, because we work really hard to teach all of you what you need to do to protect yourself and your family. So on that note, I would like to say thank you, Jesse, for coming to my channel. And I've certainly learned a lot. You're a very knowledgeable person. I can't wait to having our next discussion. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I can't wait as well.
All right. So see you later, everyone.